Have you ever stopped to think that some of the memories you hold so dear might simply not have happened the way you remember them? Perhaps an important conversation, a striking detail from childhood, a specific scene from a relationship. Did all of this happen exactly as you believe? Or could your brain, that well-intentioned narrator, be creating something else? False memories without you even realizing it? What you're about to discover might surprise you, and perhaps even make you a little suspicious of your own mind. But stick with me until the end, because understanding why memories change is one of the keys to understanding the deepest mysteries of the human brain. The truth is that our mind doesn't work like a camera recording reality. It functions much more like a video editor, recording loose pieces, reorganizing emotions, filling in gaps, and reconstructing stories according to what it considers most coherent. And it is precisely in this reconstruction that, false memories, these things can happen. The most curious thing is that this phenomenon doesn't only occur in extreme or traumatic situations. It's present in your daily life, even in the simplest moments. Have you ever experienced this? That, "I'm sure it was like this," followed by someone saying no, that everything happened differently. It's uncomfortable, almost irritating. But it's real. And it's human. Sometimes, a simple comment from another person is enough to shape your memory. Other times, an intense emotion completely alters how your brain stores what you've experienced. This is because memories are deeply influenced by feelings, context, and how you interpret the world around you. Strong emotions like fear, love, anger, or surprise leave deeper traces, but not always more accurate ones. And this paradox is fascinating. The more vivid the memory seems, the greater the risk of it being distorted. Sounds strange, I know. But that's exactly how neuroscience explains a good part of the mistakes our minds make. Furthermore, there is something even more intriguing. The brain not only records what happened, but it also records what believes what could have happened. It combines real memories with fragments of imagination, expectations, and even stories you've heard countless times. Little by little, this mixture takes shape, gains color, and gains conviction. Suddenly, what began as a supposition transforms into something you would swear you experienced. This phenomenon is so common that it has been extensively studied. And the more scientists investigate, the more they discover how malleable, flexible, and vulnerable our memory is to the small interferences of daily life. But why would the brain do that? Why create something that never happened? The answer isn't so simple, but one thing is certain. It's all part of how your mind tries to keep you safe, coherent, and functional. Instead of storing every detail of reality, which would be impossible, the brain selects, summarizes, and reconstructs. It creates narratives that make sense. And sometimes, to complete the story, it invents a piece of the puzzle. A small detail here, another there, until the memory becomes solid enough for you to believe it without questioning. And when you remember something, you're not just accessing an old memory, you're recreating the memory in that exact moment. Each memory is rewritten. Each recollection undergoes a new edit. And it is in this constant editing that distortions arise and gain strength, transforming into memories that seem as real as a true event. And this is where the story gets even more interesting, because understanding how these distortions happen opens up something even deeper. Understanding how your mind works behind the scenes while you live, feel, and interpret the world. Now that you've entered this mysterious territory of false memories, we can move on to something even more surprising. And as you begin to understand how the brain reconstructs memories, you might realize how many times you've been absolutely certain of something, only to discover that it wasn't quite so. This feeling of strangeness, almost like a small internal shock, is more common than it seems and, in a way, connects us deeply. We've all lived through moments marked by memories that seemed solid, true, unquestionable, until a new detail, another version of the story, or a simple conversation casts doubt on everything. And that's precisely where the topic of false memories resonates so deeply. It exposes the fragility of what we consider indisputably real. The most curious thing is that this doesn't only happen in dramatic or emotional situations. It can arise from something simple, like remembering a phrase someone never said, swearing an object was in a place it never was, or insisting an event happened in a different order. Have you ever experienced this? That conviction that seems unshakable, but disappears the moment someone shows different evidence. This phenomenon is human, universal, and the more we think about it, the more we realize how malleable, flexible, and constantly influenced our memories are by emotions, expectations, and even subtle suggestions from the environment. And that's precisely why this topic sparks so much curiosity. It reveals that our minds don't record life like a camera, but like a creative editor. It reorganizes facts, fills in gaps, mixes imagination with reality, and delivers a story that makes sense. And when we understand this dynamic, we begin to question not only what we remember but how we remember, and what that says about who we are. If this topic resonates with you, leave a comment below about what has resonated with you so far. Your experience can enlighten others who, like you, have questioned their own memory. It's always incredible to see how, when we share, we realize that our doubts and mysteries are more common than we imagine. And since we're diving together into this fascinating universe of mind distortions, I need to ask you for something that truly strengthens the work here on the channel. When you comment, like the video, and subscribe, it's not just a gesture of support, it's a direct sign that you want to continue exploring content that provokes reflection, sparks curiosity, and broadens our understanding of the phenomena of the human brain. Each interaction helps this content reach more people, increases the strength of the community, and allows profound topics like this to continue being produced with dedication. Your participation is what keeps this journey alive. So, if you're enjoying this conversation and want to keep watching videos that explore the mysteries of the human mind and body, click like and subscribe to the channel right now. This makes all the difference in helping this space continue to grow and bring discussions that truly transform how we see ourselves. And while you do that, we'll keep moving forward, because what comes next may reveal even more about how these false memories are formed, and why they seem as real as any true memory. A false memory isn't a complete invention, nor a delusion, nor a lie you tell yourself. It's something much more subtle, and therefore so powerful. It arises when your brain reconstructs a real event, but adds small details that never existed, as if adjusting the story to make it seem more logical, more coherent, or more emotionally acceptable. This process happens behind the scenes of the mind without you realizing it, because memories aren't automatic recordings of life. They don't function like a perfect video archive. They are constant, living, malleable reconstructions. And every reconstruction, however sophisticated, can fail. The surprising thing is realizing that these failures happen much more frequently than we imagine, and it's not because you have a problem, but because that's exactly how the human brain operates. When you relive a memory, your brain isn't just pulling up an old file. It's actually reconstructing the scene in that exact instant, using fragments of what really happened, mixed with emotions, expectations, beliefs, and contexts accumulated throughout life. And while doing so, it inevitably fills in gaps. Sometimes with real information. Other times with things that never actually happened but that fit so well into the narrative that they seem true. That's why so many people swear they saw something, heard something, or experienced something that, in practice, never existed in that way. This has happened to you, even if you don't realize it. It's like an editing trick created by the brain itself. A trick that works so well that you believe it without questioning. This malleability of memory plays an important role in our ability to adapt. Imagine if every detail of your life were stored in a raw, unfiltered way. It would be impossible to process so much information. So the brain chooses, simplifies, and reorganizes. It creates shortcuts, summaries, and combines bits of different experiences to form a single memory. And to maintain the coherence of the story, it fits in details that seem natural, even if they aren't accurate. This dynamic is part of your mindset, of how you construct identity and meaning. That's why false memories don't only appear in big events, but also in small ones. That comment that sounds real, the image of an object you're sure you saw, the order of an event you rearrange without realizing it. These are small distortions that shape how you interpret the world and, in many cases, influence important decisions. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because understanding this phenomenon isn't just about understanding how memories work, but about perceiving the hidden truth about how your mind fills the void between what happened and what you feel should have happened. Sometimes, a false memory is born from an intense emotion. Other times, it arises from the need to make sense of the experience, even if that sense is just a comforting illusion. There's a huge impact here, because these memories shape your view of people, relationships, and yourself. You believe you're accessing facts, when in reality you're accessing a constantly transforming story. And the more you think about it, the stronger it becomes. Not because it's true, but because it's been rewritten multiple times. There's also the element of imagination, something we rarely associate with memory, but which plays a profound role in this process. When you try to remember something but aren't sure of the details, your imagination fills in the gaps. And the brain accepts this addition as a natural part of remembering. From there, the boundary between reality and creation becomes increasingly blurred. This doesn't mean your mind is trying to deceive you, but rather that it's trying to construct the best possible version of the story. A version that makes emotional sense, that helps you move forward, that supports your personal narrative. It's as if each memory is a work in constant editing, a draft that the brain revisits, adjusts, and improves, believing it's protecting or strengthening you by doing so. This mechanism reveals something profound about our own mental journey. We don't live trapped in the real past but in the interpreted past. And this interpretation changes as we mature, as we face challenges, as new revelations emerge. Some memories gain strength, others lose their luster, and some transform completely. This explains why siblings remember the same childhood in such different ways, why witnesses report incompatible versions of the same event, and why, sometimes, you are absolutely certain of something that simply isn't aligned with what really happened. And as this understanding deepens, an almost inevitable question arises. If my memories can be shaped, filled in, and even reinvented, then to what extent is what I consider truth about who I am based on something concrete? This reflection opens the door to a powerful internal transformation, because by perceiving the fragility of memories, you also become more aware of how you construct meaning, how you interpret situations, and how you make decisions. It's not about distrusting everything, but about understanding that the mind is flexible, creative, and sometimes surprisingly unpredictable in its attempt to maintain a coherent narrative. Comment below, that makes sense to me. The most intriguing thing is understanding that the brain doesn't function like a hard drive that simply stores information. It works more like a film editor working tirelessly behind the scenes of your mind. The hippocampus registers the essentials, capturing the basic structure of what you've experienced like the skeleton of memory. But it's the cortex that gives life, color, and texture to this memory, filling in gaps, rearranging details, and reconstructing everything in a way that seems coherent with your personal history. It's such a sophisticated team effort that it seems infallible, and yet, sometimes this team improvises too much. When that happens, the result is a memory that seems absolutely real, but which carries small, or even large, distortions without you realizing it. These distortions arise because remembering is not reliving. Remembering is rewriting. Each time you access a memory, it goes through a process of fragmentation, reconstruction, interpretation, and finally, the final version of what your mind delivers as truth. But this truth is malleable, and it is at this point that the mechanism becomes so fascinating. There is no single static memory stored in some corner of the brain. There are fragments, sensations, interpretations, loose images that reorganize themselves with each new access. It's as if you opened an old book to reread a passage and, upon closing it, the text had changed slightly because you interpreted it differently. And this change is never random. It is guided by your mindset, by the emotions that were present at the moment of the memory, by the revelations that arose between one recollection and another, and even by the decisions you have made throughout your life. This process has a profound impact on how we construct our identity. After all, we are made of memories, of how we interpret our history, of how we tell ourselves what we have lived through. If these memories undergo transformations without us realizing it, then part of who we believe ourselves to be is also in constant reconstruction. This is not a negative thing. In fact, it is part of the human journey. This movement of rewriting the past shapes how you see challenges, relationships, fears, and dreams. It is an adaptation mechanism that can strengthen you, even when it alters details you consider unquestionable. Sometimes, rewriting happens out of simple emotional necessity. The mind tries to protect you, softening something painful or intensifying something that needs more meaning. In other situations, imagination steps in to complete what the hippocampus didn't register. And the most impressive thing is that the brain doesn't distinguish between what was actually experienced and what was reorganized during the process. For it, everything is part of the same narrative, constructed to give meaning to your experience. It's as if, faced with any gap, the brain thinks, here's a missing piece, let me adjust this so the story doesn't break. And from adjustment to adjustment, a memory emerges that seems impeccably real. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject because when we understand that each memory is an edit, and not a recording, we begin to realize how this phenomenon affects our relationships, our certainties, and even our daily discussions. How many arguments, how many misunderstandings, how many significant decisions were made based on memories that seem solid, but which were actually the result of this continuous dynamic between the hippocampus and the cortex. Suddenly, that childhood moment that marked you so much may have been emotionally rearranged. That important dialogue that you remember word for word may have gained nuances that never existed before. And the hidden truth behind this is that your mind is always choosing the best way to tell its own story, even if it means distorting fragments of what really happened. This continuous editing also reveals why, over time, our memories become more narrative and less factual. We remember less of the event itself and more of the interpretation we gave it. The brain prioritizes meaning, not accuracy. It creates emotional connections, provides context, and reorganizes priorities. And the more we think about a memory, the stronger it becomes, not because it's more true but because it has been revisited several times, renewed, and retouched. It's a process of emotional reconstruction that shapes how you see your own past and, consequently, how you live the present. This realization may be uncomfortable at first glance, but it can also be liberating. It opens up space for internal transformation because it shows that not everything you hold as absolute truth needs to remain defined that way. You can reinterpret your history, revisit meanings, and understand that some emotional burdens may not be as solid as they seemed. This mental flexibility allows for new decisions, new ways of dealing with old experiences, and new ways of seeing yourself. And by understanding how the brain edits, you gradually begin to notice patterns, small clues that reveal when a memory may not be as accurate as it seems. Not to doubt everything, but to recognize that the mind works with nuances, with adaptations, with small inventions that make your personal narrative more fluid and understandable. And this understanding opens the way to even deeper revelations about why these edits happen and how they shape everything you consider to be true. Write this down, I'm on this journey too. Emotions play a much deeper role in shaping your memories than you might imagine. They're not just a backdrop to what you've experienced, they're the fuel that shapes, intensifies, and often distorts how the brain registers every detail. When something evokes a very strong emotion, the brain tries to capture the experience more vividly, as if saying, "This is important, remember it well." But in this effort to highlight the moment, it can sacrifice accuracy. It's like over-revealing the contrast in a photograph. Some contours become more defined, more dramatic, while others are lost. And that's precisely where distorted memories begin to form, leaving such a powerful emotional imprint that you believe the memory without hesitation. Consider situations like unexpected grief. The emotional impact is so great that the brain registers the pain, the confusion, the feeling of emptiness, but the details about who was present, what was said, or what actually happened can become hazy. However, you feel you remember everything clearly because the intensity of the emotion creates a kind of internal truth, even if some facts have been rearranged or even replaced. In an intense fight, for example, your memory tends to reinforce the tone of voice, the facial expression, the feeling of injustice, but it may alter the order of sentences, exaggerate a gesture, or erase a nuance. In a big scare, your mind registers the adrenaline before registering the events. And, in infatuation, the brain paints scenes with stronger colors than reality allows. It's fascinating to realize that the more intense the emotion encompassing a moment, the greater the chance that the brain will invent details to complete the narrative, like an artist adding extra brushstrokes to make the work seem more harmonious. This relationship between emotion and memory is part of your human journey, because what touches you deeply isn't stored as cold data. It's recorded as an experience that shapes mindset, beliefs, attitudes, and even important decisions. And precisely for this reason, emotional memories seem so real. They carry an internal weight that, for the brain, is worth more than accuracy. It's not concerned with documentary precision, it's concerned with meaning. It's meaning that determines the impact of the memory, not fidelity to the facts. That's why moments like the first meeting with someone special, an argument that marked your life, a fright that changed your behavior, or a loss that transformed your worldview become very strong memories, but vulnerable to distortions. The most curious thing is that these distortions often happen silently, almost invisibly. A detail that was forgotten can be filled in with something that seems right. A phrase you remember hearing may actually be an emotional interpretation of something the person never literally said. The mind does this to construct a coherent narrative, a narrative that matches the feeling experienced. The hidden truth is that, for the brain, emotion and memory are so deeply linked that separating what you felt from what actually happened becomes an almost impossible task. This is why two people who went through the same emotional situation can remember everything in completely different ways. Each had a distinct internal experience, and it is this experience, not the raw fact, that shapes the final memory. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject because when you understand how emotions infiltrate memories, you realize that many of the certainties you hold about your own history were built in layers. First the event, then the emotional interpretation, then the reconstruction that the brain makes to unite these parts. And so, each time you revisit that memory, it doesn't return the same. It comes back impregnated with the most recent emotional version, the one you held the last time you thought about it. This creates a reinforcing cycle in which emotion shapes memory, and memory reinforces emotion. It's an internal dance that happens in the shadows without you realizing it, but which profoundly influences your beliefs, your judgments, and even your relationships. When you think about the past, what truly comes back isn't reality, but the emotional interpretation of reality. This means that certain memories can seem extremely vivid, as if they happened yesterday, even when they are full of small internal adjustments. And paradoxically, other less emotional memories can simply disappear as if they never existed. This is called emotional selectivity. The brain retains what impacts you, not what is factual. It favors what has meaning, not what is accurate. And the stronger the emotion associated with the moment, the stronger the conviction that your memory is correct, even if it isn't. This revelation is powerful because it shows how much we are shaped by experiences that are not only lived but felt. It shows that a large part of our emotional identity comes from stories that have been rewritten many times, always with new layers of meaning. And by recognizing this, an internal transformation is born. You begin to see your own memories with more depth, more kindness, and more awareness of how much your mind tries to protect you, even if, to do so, it needs to fill gaps with small inventions. Write this down. That makes sense to me. External influence on the formation of your memories is one of the most surprising aspects of this invisible process that takes place within your mind. Often you believe that a memory belongs only to you, that it is the exclusive product of your personal experience, but the hidden truth is that other people can, in fact, insert details into your memory without realizing it, and without you realizing it either. This happens because your brain doesn't reject external suggestions. On the contrary, it tries to integrate them coherently into the narrative you already have. When someone asks a seemingly innocent question like, "Was he wearing that blue jacket?" your brain doesn't just answer yes or no. It tries to visualize the scene. It tries to fill in the picture. And if that blue jacket fits into the image it's reconstructing, it can end up becoming part of the memory, even if it never existed. It's impressive how a simple phrase can redefine an entire event. This type of interference happens all the time, in everyday situations you wouldn't even imagine. In crime reports, for example, witnesses often describe details that were implanted by questions suggested during the investigation. In work meetings, someone comments that everyone agreed with a certain idea, and you, trying to remember, end up accessing more the emotion of the moment than the concrete fact. In family conversations, old stories are repeated so many times that some people begin to believe they were present at moments they never lived. Repetition gives weight, suggestion gives form, and the brain gives life to what should only be an external narrative. It's as if each person around you has the power to insert small pieces into the puzzle you call the past. This happens because memory is profoundly social. It doesn't exist in isolation. Your mind is always in dialogue with the world, always trying to integrate new elements into what you already believe. And when someone describes something with emotion, conviction, or striking details, the brain interprets this as an important clue to reconstruct the memory. It's as if it were saying, if this person is so right, perhaps I should consider this too. Little by little, the suggestion blends with what you remember, to the point where it becomes almost impossible to separate what is yours from what came from outside. Memory then transforms into a collective construction, a work edited by many hands, even if you still think you created it alone. This mechanism has a huge impact on your emotional journey because it means that some of the memories that shape your decisions, beliefs, and judgments today may have been influenced by conversations you had years ago, by opinions you heard repeatedly, or even by interpretations that other people projected onto you. It's not uncommon for someone to believe they were shy as a child because they always heard that from their family. Or to remember an episode of school humiliation more intensely than it actually happened because the people around them reinforced that narrative. The brain accepts these suggestions as if they were part of the original story. And, in a way, they end up becoming so because they begin to influence your mindset, your worldview, and even how you deal with challenges. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject because understanding the power of external influence not only clarifies how your memory works, but also opens your eyes to the revelations that emerge when you realize how easy it is to absorb narratives that aren't your own. Often you carry not only your own memories, you also carry other people's interpretations, expectations projected onto you, versions of events that others have repeated until they seem true. And the most curious thing is that the more these accounts are reinforced, the stronger they become in your brain, as if each repetition solidifies a piece of memory. It doesn't matter if the detail was invented or altered. What matters is the emotional weight it gains over time. This influence isn't necessarily negative. In many cases, it helps you reconstruct disconnected moments, find meaning in complex situations, and reorganize your timeline in a more understandable way. But it can also cause you to carry stories that don't accurately represent who you were, and yet they shape who you become. That's why sometimes you feel you were born with certain characteristics that were actually attributed to you over the years. Or you believe in versions of family conflicts that were shaped by whoever told the story most often, not by whoever lived it most accurately. The brain doesn't choose the true version, it chooses the most emotionally coherent version. This process is so natural that it goes unnoticed. When someone recounts a story very vividly, your mind tries to keep up with that vividness. When someone describes a scene in detail, your brain tries to visualize those details. And when you participate in a conversation where everyone seems to agree on how something happened, your memory tries to align itself with the consensus, even if deep down you have doubts. It does this because it seeks security. It seeks coherence. It seeks connection. Memory is not just a record of the past. It is a tool for belonging, for social construction, for strengthening bonds. And the more you understand this mechanism, the more you realize that some memories you hold firmly may have been shaped by layers of suggestion. Not because someone wanted to deceive you, but because the human mind works this way, open, permeable, influenceable, and, precisely for that reason, profoundly human. This understanding opens the way for a powerful inner transformation, because it gives you the chance to revisit feelings, reinterpret events, and see your past with more clarity and compassion. Comment below, I recognize that. The most famous cases in psychology are beginning to reveal, with almost disconcerting clarity, how much more fragile our memory is than we would like to admit. And perhaps no name has illuminated this territory as much as that of Elizabeth Loftus. She dedicated her life to investigating precisely what everyone believed to be indisputable: human memory. In her experiments, people completely convinced that they had witnessed crimes, accidents, or shocking scenes were confronted with the truth. None of that had happened before them. The memory was vivid, full of details, charged with emotion, but entirely false. The simple way the question was formulated was enough to create a new and completely imagined version of the event. It was enough to change a word, change the tone, suggest a possibility. The brain did the rest with the absolute confidence of someone who believes they are telling the truth. Then came one of the most fascinating and unsettling studies ever conducted. The famous Lost in the Mall, in which perfectly healthy adults came to believe they had been lost in a shopping mall as children, something that never happened. They not only accepted the idea, they began to describe it in detail, including sensations, smells, dialogues, and emotions. It's as if the brain said, if you're telling me this, then I must have lived it. And from there, it filled in the void, constructed the narrative, and transformed the suggestion into memory. The boundary between imagination and recollection dissolved, like ink diluting in water. These studies changed what psychology understands about the human mind and opened doors to a profound transformation in how we deal with testimony, legal proceedings, emotional accounts, and even our own personal history. The impact of this is enormous, because when we see science proving that a person can remember with absolute conviction something they never experienced, we begin to realize how much our certainties may be based on internal constructs and not on facts. And here we are not talking about lies, but about a natural mechanism of memory, a mechanism that tries to protect you, fill in gaps, and give meaning to the past, even if it needs to create entire scenes behind the scenes of consciousness. It's intriguing to imagine that moments that today seem fundamental to your identity may have been altered by details that your mind invented to complete the narrative. This doesn't diminish your story, it only makes it more human. It reveals how much each memory is the result of an emotional journey, a combination of sensations, desires, fear, interpretation, and external influence. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject because when we observe these experiments through the lens of personal transformation, we realize that memory is less a record and more a continuous creation. It adapts, molds itself, bends to keep up with the mindset you have today. That's why childhood memories seem different when you grow up. It's not just time that distorts, it's you. Your new experiences, your values, your decisions, all of that reconfigures how you remember. A sad memory can take on a different meaning when you understand the context. A joyful memory can become nostalgic when you recognize what you've lost. Memory is not static and perhaps never has been. It moves with you, like an emotional shadow that accompanies your journey and changes shape as the light of life shines upon it. These experiments also reveal another hidden truth. Your mind is extraordinarily creative. When a piece of the story is missing, it doesn't leave the space blank. It creates. It adapts. It imagines. And this imagination, once integrated into memory, becomes as natural as any lived event. That's why you can clearly describe a scene that never happened, or remember conversations that never took place, or believe you said something you only thought. The brain doesn't distinguish between the real and the reconstructed. It registers what makes sense. That's how it protects and guides you, even when memories deviate from the facts. And this realization shouldn't frighten you, but rather broaden your understanding of the impact your mind has on how you see the world. When you look at these studies honestly, you realize that no one is immune to this phenomenon. Memory is fallible for everyone, from ordinary people to experts, from children to adults with complex lives. And this failure is not a defect, but part of how the brain manages the avalanche of information it receives every day. It chooses what is emotionally relevant, what makes sense for your internal narrative, what helps you move forward. And in this process, small distortions are born, grow, and sometimes become pillars of your personal story. It's fascinating to realize that if memory is so malleable, then so is your identity. This doesn't make your life any less real, but it gives you the freedom to reinterpret your past with more lightness and awareness. It shows that you're not stuck in rigid versions of what you've lived. You are constantly rebuilding, always open to new revelations, always able to see with different eyes what once seemed immutable. Write this down. I'm on this journey too. One of the most transformative aspects of understanding all of this is realizing that, while you can't completely prevent the creation of false memories, you can learn to recognize when they are arising and even reduce their impact on your life. This doesn't happen with complex techniques, but with small mindset shifts that strengthen your relationship with your own memory. The first of these is questioning memories that seem too vivid. When a memory emerges with almost cinematic detail, especially from emotionally intense situations, it's worth considering whether that clarity isn't actually a result of reconstruction, and not the original event. Extremely clear memories can be the most deceptive, precisely because the brain has filled in so many gaps that even you believe the final version. Another way to protect yourself is to avoid automatically filling in what you don't remember. Your brain loves to do this. When a piece of the story is missing, it creates a bridge, an assumption, and improvised filling. But if you adopt the habit of saying, "I don't remember that detail," instead of trying to guess, you'll already be breaking one of the mechanisms that most fuel false memories. Honesty with the void, however uncomfortable it may be, protects you from believing in details that never existed. And this small gesture can have a huge impact on your decisions, your relationships, and how you interpret your own past. It's also important to be wary of memories that first surface after a highly suggestive conversation. This could involve someone telling an old story, showing photos, describing scenes, or asking detailed questions. When this happens, the resulting memory may be more of an influence construct than a true record. It's as if the suggestion acts as a mold, and your brain fills in the rest with what makes sense. Not because it wants to deceive you, but because it's always trying to construct a coherent narrative, even if it needs to invent small pieces along the way. And perhaps the most powerful practice is accepting that remembering is not absolute proof. It seems simple, but this is one of the most profound revelations about the human mind. What you remember is subject to the same flaws, interferences, and distortions as any other human memory. And understanding this doesn't weaken you, it strengthens you. Because it gives you space to revise beliefs, alleviate old guilt, see relationships with more nuance, and even reinterpret moments that previously seemed immutable. This awareness paves the way for inner transformation, allowing you to deal with your memories with more kindness and flexibility. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject because understanding the fragility of memory reveals something greater about how we construct our stories. When you realize that the brain sometimes invents details to protect you, you begin to see your own journey with more humanity. It doesn't want to deceive you, it wants to keep you safe. This reconstruction mechanism emerges as a way to fill in gaps, consolidate emotions, organize experiences, and help you move forward, even when the past is confusing or painful. And this revelation changes everything because it shows that you are not defined by inaccurate memories, you are shaped by how you choose to interpret what you have lived through. This understanding brings powerful clarity. If memory is flexible, you are not trapped in the heaviest or most distorted versions of the past. You can reconstruct meanings, release old pains, and adjust internal narratives that no longer make sense. Not to create new illusions, but to build a lighter and more conscious relationship with yourself. That is the true strength of this knowledge. The possibility of transforming not only how you understand your brain, but how you understand your own history. And as you begin to recognize when a memory has been influenced, when it has been filled with assumptions, or when it was born from intense emotion, you begin to navigate your life with more clarity. You begin to realize that some certainties were merely interpretations. You begin to see that some guilt was unnecessary. You begin to understand that not all arguments needed to be won, because perhaps the memories that supported certain arguments were not as solid as they seemed. This awareness does not create insecurity, it creates freedom. Freedom to reassess decisions, to give new meaning to pain, and to relate to the past in a more mature way. And when that understanding connects with real life, you discover that your mind is constantly trying to construct meaning. It works behind the scenes, rearranging memories to create continuity, stability, and emotional protection. And even if sometimes that protection comes in the form of invented details, the goal is always the same: to help you cope with the world. Your brain doesn't want to deceive you. It just wants to keep you safe, even if that means inventing details along the way. If you enjoy understanding the mysteries of the human brain and want to discover other strange phenomena of the mind, then leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and comment below. Have you ever realized that you remembered something that, in the end, wasn't quite right? And if you've made it this far, some part of this conversation probably touched on something that resonates with you, perhaps an old memory, perhaps a new way of seeing your own mind. And that's precisely why I want to extend a gentle invitation, almost like a handshake at the end of a good conversation. If this content has helped you better understand your own internal processes, if it has sparked some reflection or opened up space for a new mindset, consider subscribing to the channel. Here we continue exploring these mysteries of the human mind in a profound, yet always human, always relatable way. Your presence here makes this journey even more worthwhile. And before you go, leave a comment so I know you stayed with me until the end. You can write, "I'm with you until the end." This creates a beautiful connection between us and helps strengthen this community that is forming around conversations that truly matter. If the video made you think, leave a like too. Not as a button pressed out of obligation, but as a simple gesture from someone who recognizes that this exchange made a difference in some way. And of course, if you want to continue diving into this fascinating universe, there's a video here that complements this topic. Click and continue with me there.